reading Michael Jackson's Moonwalk to you today. Moonwalk by Michael Jackson. This book is dedicated to Fred Astaire. New introduction to the 2009 reissued edition. Michael Jackson was not an artist who came along once in a decade, a generation, or a lifetime. He was an artist who came along only once, period. I had the good fortune of meeting him when he was 9 years old. Even then, there was something so compelling about him that, frankly, I did not know what to make of it. How could this kid have that effect on me? It was an effect so potent that I would immediately discard my misgivings about being in business with kid acts and rush to create an environment for Michael and his brothers that would nurture and expand their talent. Even then, he had a knowingness about him. He knew he was special. He could dance and sing and act like anybody. He just wanted to do it better. He was driven by his hunger to learn, to constantly top himself, to be the best. He was the consummate student. He studied the greats and became greater. He raised the bar and then broke the bar. His talent and creativity thrust him and entertainment into the stratosphere. Moonwalk was the first time he told his own Moonwalk was the first time he told his story in his own words, reflecting on his life, how he thought, how he felt about things. This book is a unique opportunity to get to know the real genius of Michael and how this young kid from Gary, Indiana, propelled himself to become the greatest star in the world. Moonwalk reveals so much of Michael's true self, but you have to read between the lines to really understand what he was all about. I must say, though, that he did have two personalities. Offstage, he was shy, soft-spoken, and childlike. But when he took that stage in front of his screaming fans, he turned into another personality, a master, a take-no-prisoners showman. For him, it was kill or be killed. Besides being a creative master of writing, singing, producing, acting, and staging, he was also a thinker. And in order to protect himself, sometimes he created mental mechanisms, personalities, on stage, off stage, in boardrooms, in his deal making, business plans, and self promotion. Brilliant, right? Genius, damn right. He made it all happen. His personality may have been contradictory, but his core was always pure, beautiful, and loving. When Michael and his brothers Jackie, Jermaine, Tito, and Marlon auditioned for me at Motown in Detroit that July day in 1968, they blew us all away with their incredible talent. Little Michael's performance was way beyond his years. After singing and dancing like James Brown and Jackie Wilson, he sang a Smokey Robinson song called "Who's Loving You?" with the sadness and passion of a man who had been living with the blues and heartbreak his whole life. I couldn't believe it. As great as Smokey sang it, Michael was better. I told Smokey, "Hey man, I think he got you on that one." Smokey said, "Me too." When Michael and his brothers performed it on The Ed Sullivan Show, there was no doubt that the rest of the world agreed. I moved them out to California, and they became part of the Grody and Motown families. Those were great times. We swam, we joked, we played games, we rehearsed. I put together a songwriting team, and we came up with 4 hit records for them. I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There. The Jackson 5 was the only group in history to ever have their first 4 singles go to number 1. We were thrilled, especially Michael. We had broken through a major barrier. For Michael, it was the inspiration to break all the rest. And he did. We cast Michael with Diana Ross in a movie we produced called The Wiz, and there he met legendary producer Quincy Jones. That collaboration yielded the greatest selling album of all time, Thriller, along with Off the Wall and Bad. In 1983, the Jacksons were no longer at Motown. However, the brothers reunited to perform on the television special Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, Forever. After a high powered, dazzling melody of their songs, Michael took the stage alone and proceeded to make pop history. From the first beat of Billie Jean and the toss of his hat, I was mesmerized. But when he did his iconic moonwalk, I was shocked. It was magical. He soared into orbit and never came down. Though it ended way too soon, Michael's life was beautiful. Sure, there were some sad times, and maybe some questionable decisions on his part. But but Michael Jackson accomplished everything he dreamed of. Even at 9 years old, his passion was to be the greatest entertainer in the world. He was willing to work hard and do whatever it took to become what he needed, what he indeed was, the undisputed king of pop the world over, and still, that's never changing. What kid wouldn't give his right arm to fulfill his wildest childhood dreams? Michael loved it all, every moment on stage, every moment in rehearsal. He loved creating what had never been done before. He loved giving all he had to his music and all he had to his fans. I mean, Michael was awesome, totally in charge. In fact, the more I think and talk about Michael, the more I feel the king of pop was not big enough for him. I think he was simply the greatest entertainer that ever lived. Barry Gordon, founder of Motown, 2009. What can one say about Michael Jackson? He is one of the world's most acclaimed art entertainers, an innovative and exciting songwriter whose dancing seems to defy gravity and has been heralded by the likes of Fred Astaire, uh, Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. His his public is his public is perhaps unaware of the extent of his dedication to his craft. Restless, seldom satisfied, he is a perfectionist who is constantly challenging himself. To many people, Michael Jackson seems an elusive personality, but to those who work with him, he is not. This talented artist is a sensitive man, warm, funny, and full of insight. Michael's book, Moonwalk, provides a startling glimpse of the artist at work and the artist in reflection. Jacqueline Kenny Onassis. Girl. Okay. When I wanted to discover something, I began by reading up everything that has been done along that line in the past. That's what all the books in the library are for. I see what has been accomplished at great labor and expense in the past. I gather the data of many thousands of experiments as a starting point, and then I make thousands more. The three essentials to achieve anything worthwhile are first, hard work, second, stick to itiveness, and third, common sense. Thomas Edison. When the real music comes to me, the music of the spheres, the music that surpasseth understanding, that has nothing to do with me, because I'm just a channel. I'm just the channel. The only joy for me is for it to be given to me and transcribe it, like a medium. Those moments are what I live for. John Lennon. Moonwalk. Chapter 1. Just kids with a dream. I've always wanted to be able to tell stories, stories that came from my soul. I'd like to sit by a fire and tell people stories, make them see pictures, make them cry and laugh, take them anywhere emotionally with something as deceptively simple as words. I'd like to tell tales to move their souls and transform them. I've always wanted to be able to do that. Imagine how the great writers must feel knowing they have that power. I sometimes feel I could do it. It's something I'd like to develop. In a way, songwriting uses the same skills, creates the emotion highs and lows, but the story is a sketch. It's a quicksilver. There are very few books written on the art of storytelling, how to grip listeners, how to get a group of people together and amuse them. No costumes, no makeup, no nothing. Just you and your voice and your powerful ability to take them anywhere, to transform their lives, if only for minutes. As I began to tell my story, I want to repeat that I will usually say to people what they ask me about my earliest days with the Jackson 5. I was so little when we began to work on our music that I don't really remember much about it. Most people have the luxury of careers that start when they're old enough to know exactly what they're doing and why, but of course, that wasn't true for me. They remember everything that happened to them, but I was only 5 years old. When you're a show business child, you really don't have the maturity to understand a great deal of what is going on around you. People make a lot of decisions concerning your life when you're out of the room. So here's what I remember. I remember singing at the top of my voice and dancing with real joy and working too hard for a child. Of course, there are many details I don't remember at all. I do remember the Jackson 5 taking off, really taking off, when I was only 8 or 9. I was born in Indiana. I was born in Gary, Indiana, on a late summer night in 1958, the seventh of my parents' 9 children. My father, Joe Jackson, was born in Arkansas. my my father, Joe Jackson, was born in Arkansas, and in 1949 he married my mother, Catherine Sacruse, whose people come from whose people came from Alabama. My sister Maureen was born the following year and had the tough job of being the oldest. Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Latoya, and Marlon were all next in line. Randy and Janet came after me. A part of my earliest memories is my father's job working in the steel mill. It was tough, mind-numbing work, and he played music for escape. At the same time, my mother was working in the department store. Because of my father and because of my mother's own love of music, we heard it all the time at home. My father and his brother had a group called the Falcons, who were the local R&B band. My father played the guitar, as did his brother. They would do some of the great early rock and roll and blues songs by Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Otis Redding, you name it. All of those styles were amazing, and each had an influence on Joe and on us, although we were too young to know it at the time. The Falcons practiced in the living room of our house in Gary, so I was raised on R&B. Since we were 9 kids and my father's brothers had 8 of his own, our combined numbers made for a huge family. Music was what we did for entertainment, and those times helped keep us together and kind of encouraged my father to be a family-oriented man. The Jackson 5 were born out of this tradition. We later became the Jacksons, and because of this training and musical tradition, I moved out on my own and established a sound that was mine. That is mine. I remember my childhood as mostly work, even though I loved to sing. I wasn't forced into this business by stage parents, the way Julie Garland was. I did it because I enjoyed it. and because it was as natural to me as drawing a breath and exhaling it. It was as natural to me as drawing a breath and exhaling it. I did it because I was compelled to do it, not by parents or family, but by my own inner life in the world of music. There were times, let me make that clear, when I'd come home from school and I'd only have time to put my books down and get ready for the studio. Once there, I'd sing until late at night, until it was past my bedtime, really. There was a park across the street from the Motown studio, and I can remember looking at those kids playing games. I just stare at them and wonder. I couldn't imagine such freedom, such a carefree free life, and wish more than anything that I had that kind of freedom, that I could walk away and be like them. So there were sad moments in my childhood. It's true for any child star. Elizabeth Taylor told me she felt the same way. When you're young and you're working, the world can seem awfully unfair. I wasn't forced to be Little Michael the lead singer. I did it and I loved it, but it was hard work. If we were doing an album, for example, we'd go off to the studio after school and I might or might not get a snack. Sometimes there just wasn't time. I'd come home exhausted and it'd be 11 or 12 and past time to go to bed. So I very much identify with anyone who had worked as a child. I know how they struggled. I know what they sacrificed. I also know what they learned. I've learned that it becomes more of a challenge as one gets older. I feel old for some reason. I really feel like an old soul, someone who had seen a lot and experienced a lot. Because of all the years I've clocked in, it's hard for me to accept that I am only 29. I've been in the business for 24 years. Sometimes I feel like I should be near the end of my life, turning 80, with people patting me on the back. That's what comes from starting so young. When I first performed with my brothers, we were known as the Jacksons. We would later become the Jackson 5. Still later, after we left Motown, we would reclaim the Jacksons' name again. Every one of my albums, or the group's albums, had been dedicated to our mother, Katherine Jackson, since we took over our own careers and began to produce our own music. My first memories are of her holding me and singing songs like You Are My Sunshine and Cotton Fields. She sang to me and to my brothers and sisters often. Even though she had lived in Indiana for some time, my mother grew up in Alabama, and in that part of the country, it was just as common for black people to be raised with country and western music on the radio as it was for them to hear spirituals in church. She likes Willie Nelson to this day. She has always had a beautiful voice, and I suppose I get my singing ability from my mother, and of course, from God. Mom played the clarinet and the piano, which she had taught my oldest sister Maureen, whom we call Rebby, to play, just as she'd teach my other older sister Latoya. My mother knew from an early age that she would never perform the music she loved in front of others, not because she didn't have the talent and the ability, but because she was crippled by polio as a child. She got over the disease, but not without a permanent limp in her walk. She had to miss a great deal of school as a child, but she told us that she was lucky to recover at a time when so many people died from the disease. I remember how important it was to her that we got the sugar cube vaccine. She even made us miss a youth club show one Saturday afternoon. That's how important it was in our family. My mother knew her polio was not a curse, but a test that God gave her to triumph over, and she instilled in me a love of Him that I will always have. She taught me that my talent for singing and dancing was as much God's work as a beautiful sunset or a storm that left snow for children to play in. Despite all the time we spent rehearsing and traveling, Mom would find time to take me to the Kingdom Hall of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
This chapter is 60 for pages, and we are only on page 12. Click subscribe. And hit that notification bell to instantly hear part 2 of chapter 1 of Michael Jackson's Moonwalk.